So you're learning French, or maybe you're just thinking about it, but you've heard the rumors. The ones that say French grammar is this terrifying labyrinth of endless rules, bizarre exceptions, and, oh yeah, the totally confusing genders. Well, what if I told you that reputation is kind of a myth? Today, we're going to completely demystify French grammar. We are building a step-by-step blueprint to French fluency that actually makes sense.
I mean, it's so easy to look at French and feel like it's just an impossible nightmare. And honestly, I totally want to validate that frustration right out of the gate. The anxiety is real. So many learners just get completely overwhelmed by the way French grammar is traditionally taught. But here's the thought. What if the problem isn't the language itself? What if the problem is just how we're looking at it?
Okay, let's dive into this, because this right here, this number changes everything. 80%. Did you know that 80% of French word order is exactly the same as English? It's true. Both languages rely heavily on a subject-verb-object structure. So when you want to say, I speak English, in French, it translates literally word for word to je parle anglais. You already have an intuitive hardwired grasp of the vast majority of French sentence structure. We literally just need to hack the remaining 20%.
So here is how we're going to do it. First, we'll tackle the myth of French grammar. Then we'll get into hacking nouns and genders. After that, we'll look at building better French sentences, followed by conquering verbs and conjugation. And finally, we'll wrap up with the best practices and resources to keep you going. Let's get right into it.
Starting with Section 1, the myth of French grammar, and why it really isn't as scary as it looks. Okay, seriously, why is it that the second we open a typical grammar textbook, we immediately want to slam it shut and walk away? I mean, look at this. Standard grammar cheat sheets are so chaotic. Traditional resources just bombard us with way too much theory right off the bat. Massive, endless tables of pronouns and adjectives and articles. But here is the secret they don't tell you. You absolutely do not need to memorize the entire dictionary of rules to start. You just need a handful of actionable hacks to get yourself communicating effectively. Which brings us to Section 2, hacking nouns and genders using what we call the mental box technique. Now, assigning genders. This is where English speakers usually start to panic, right? Because we don't look at a table or a chair and think of it as male or female. But check out this mind-blowing stat. There are over 2,700 nouns in French that end in the letter T, and a staggering 99% of them are masculine. 99%. That means instead of trying to guess the gender of thousands of random words, you only need to memorize a tiny, tiny fraction of exceptions. If you just remember that la nuit, the night, and l'amour, death, are feminine, you've essentially just mastered the gender of nearly 3,000 words in one go. Pretty efficient, right? To actually manage all these rules and their exceptions without losing your mind, I highly recommend the mental box technique. Basically, you visually chunk your information. Imagine a literal box in your mind for the rule and anchor it with a word you already know. So take la cuisine. That anchors the rule that words ending in "-ine" are almost always feminine. Then you build a separate, smaller box for the exceptions, anchored by a word like le magazine, which is masculine. By contrasting that anchor word for the rule with the anchor word for the exception, you're locking it securely into your memory. All right, let's move on to Section 3, building better French sentences. We're going to look at bags and verbs of state. So remember how we established earlier that 80% of French sentence structure matches English perfectly? Well, adjectives are where things get a little different. In English, 99% of the time, our adjectives go before the noun. In French, they usually go after. But there is a brilliant little hack for the exceptions to this rule, and it's the acronym BAGS, B-A-G-S. Short, very common adjectives related to beauty, age, goodness, and size go before the noun, just like in English. So a beautiful house is a belle maison, not a maison belle. But listen, if trying to remember where to place the adjective is stressing you out, I have an even simpler strategy for you. Just make your sentences simpler. Seriously, instead of wrestling with a complex sentence like le chat noir est gentil, the black cat is nice, just break it down. Say, le chat est noir, il est gentil. The cat is black, he is nice. This is a perfect example of how simply adjusting your phrasing lets you lean entirely on that comfortable 80% structural similarity we talked about. Oh, and here's another classic sentence building trap you'll definitely want to avoid: mixing up the verbs être, to be, and avoir, to have. Because in English, we use to be for states of being, like I am hungry or I am warm. Beginners naturally try to translate that directly using être. But in French, you literally have hunger and you have warmth.
If you mix these two verbs up when you're talking about possessing something, you're going to make a very funny beginner mistake. Trust me, you do not want to say je suis un vélo. That literally means I am a bike. You definitely want to say j'ai un vélo, I have a bike. Moving right along to section 4, conquering verbs and conjugation. Because practice really does make perfect.
Now, I know conjugation charts can look completely intimidating, but I want to reassure you right now, regular verbs follow incredibly clear, highly predictable patterns. Take a regular ER verb like parler, to speak. All you have to do is identify the stem by just dropping that ER, and then you pop on the ending that matches your subject. That's it. Once you see the pattern, you realize you aren't actually memorizing random words anymore. You're literally just applying a really simple formula. But how do you actually get those endings to stick in your brain for good? Whatever you do, don't just sit there staring passively at a textbook. You need to use this physical 4-step framework. Step 1, look at the conjugation list. Step 2, cover it up entirely. Step 3, write the conjugations out by hand from memory. And step 4, check your answers. This kind of active repetition actively forces your brain to recall the information. It builds muscle memory, and it is vastly more effective than just reading. And finally, section 5, best practices and resources. This is your toolkit for fluency. To keep all these newly built language skills nice and sharp, having the right toolkit is absolutely essential. If you're looking for structured practice, here are some rapid-fire book recommendations that the experts absolutely swear by. Practice Makes Perfect Complete French All-in-One is just fantastic for comprehensive exercises. EzeeFrench Step-by-Step is brilliant because it introduces the grammar so logically, starting with basic verbs and building up from there. And Fluent in French is less of a standard textbook and more of a strategy guide that helps you build a really effective study plan tailored to you. But hey, you can't just do workbook exercises all day long. You need real-world context. Reading is phenomenal for this, but I have a massive tip for you. Avoid adult fiction at first. Seriously, save yourself the headache. Adult literature in French uses a tense called the passé simple. It is almost never used in normal spoken French, and it will totally confuse you. Instead, go for bilingual books, children's books, or even classic comic books like Asterix and Tintin. They use conversational dialogue, they give you highly visual context, and most importantly, they use the everyday tenses you actually need to learn.
So the biggest takeaway here is that grammar shouldn't just be some abstract concept living on a page. The ultimate hack to really stimulate your memory is to tie these sentences directly to your own personal daily routine. Take this quote from a French teacher's example. Je suis professeur, je me sens bien, j'aime passer du temps dans la nature. I'm a teacher, I feel good, I like spending time in nature. Translate your actual day, your actual feelings, and your actual surroundings into French. When the language becomes about you, your brain holds on to it. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this one provocative question. How does your life story sound in French? Go find out.